I look like I'm about to go skiing or somewhere fancy. It's really stinking cold here, so. This person is walking back and forth in front of my house with the fluffiest dog, but I want to know why they've chosen this stretch of road to be their circuit. I've seen them like 3 times. Either that or 3 identical people have gotten 3 identical dogs in my neighborhood recently. Hi kids, welcome back to another pizza party. I'm Mrs. Pizza. This is Weenie, and Cheese is back there. She's just finally gotten tired, so we are going to record this nonsense while she is taking a nap, because otherwise she's a terror, and it's a lot. Also, I apologize if my glasses are just a giant glare, but I need to be able to see what I'm doing. It's either this or blind, and I choose this. Today, we are here to talk about my favorite reads of the year 2023. I tried to do it as in like a top 10 situation, but I didn't like putting a number on it. I instead decided to pick what were my favorite reads of the year and a few honorable mentions and just see whatever number turned out. It was pretty close to 10, not gonna lie. Pretty close to 10. But we are actually going to start off with the honorable mentions. Now, these are books that I did not give 5 stars, but I really enjoyed reading, and I feel like there's a perfect audience out there for these books somewhere. I just wasn't perfect. I was close, but I wasn't perfect. But if this sounds like something that would be perfect for you, I want you to be able to find out about it. I want you to read it. It was a good read. It deserves to be read. Hold up, my nose is now running. I love that you're just like my entourage, Winnie. The first one we are going to talk about is This Is How You Lose the Time War, and this is by Amal, El-Mohtar, and Max Gladstone. This is a very slim, tiny little book, and it is a beautiful read. It is absolutely gorgeous. This is the story of Red and Blue, and they are both different agents on opposing sides of a time war. This is a sci-fi novel. I don't even know how to describe this other than Red and Blue are adversaries and somehow start a correspondence between the two of them, basically because they're always trying to thwart the other one's efforts in this time war for these 2 big mega powers that are trying to orchestrate their own ends to things. And so it starts with letters where they are complimenting / picking at the other one when they beat them to the punch or really appreciated how they were beaten to the punch. And slowly these letters evolve to something more. This is a love story that is told through letters throughout time from 2 opposing sides of a war. It is beautiful. It is absolutely gorgeous, but I don't think everyone is going to love it. I think it's just going to find the right people and it's going to make it onto their favorite lists. Because there's a lot of things in this that are a little hard to even describe, and I don't want to describe them because I feel like you need to find them on your own reading this story. It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. What more should I say? The next book that is on my honorable mentions and that I am trying to find the right audience for because I know it's out there. I was definitely the right audience for this one is Red Rabbit, and that is by Alex Grecian. This is a horror Western. I had never read a Western before, but the horror elements I think really made this for me. This is the story of Sadie Grace, and Sadie Grace is a witch, and Sadie Grace has been blamed for a lot of things. And so they have put a bounty out on the head of Sadie Grace. And so in this story, we are following a group of misfits that all get together and are making the trek to where Sadie Grace is. We have a former school teacher who is now a widow, and she was on this farm trying to survive by herself. We have 2 cowboys that are also ex-soldiers, one being a former medic / doctor in a war and the other one just being a soldier, and they formed a friendship back when the war was taking place, and they now continue to travel with each other. They're besties. Then we have Old Tom, and he is a witch hunter and an old man that you will probably not like that much, but he's part of the group. And we also have Rabbit, who is a small child who doesn't speak. We also have other characters that we pick up along the way. Some of them are alive and some of them are not. This book has monsters and witches and demons and toads. So many toads. The Old West was a horrible place full of very sad things, and gruesome, messed up stuff happens to these people as they're just trying to get from one place to the other. It is funny It is dark, it is creepy, it's got cowboys. It was so much fun. And if any of that interests you, I hope that you're the right audience for this, because I really think more people should be reading this, honestly. The last honorable mention that we're going to put on this list is going to be The Wager. And this is by David Grann, who is the same author that wrote Killer of the Flower Moon, which has recently been made into a motion picture. This book is on here because I really enjoyed it, but it is a non-fiction and it is a little bit on the dry side. If you are not someone that is interested in this, I think it was really well done, and I found the story itself incredibly interesting. This person spent so much time researching and gathering information, and this is one of those stories that was probably so sensational at the time it was happening. It was probably all over the news, and then it's just kind of faded as time has gone on. So this is the story of The Wager. The Wager was a ship that I believe left England in the 1740s on a mission to intercept some Spanish armada of some kind, and met a lot of hardships along the way and eventually got shipwrecked. And then several years later, a group of survivors washed up on a shore completely emaciated in a makeshift boat and said, "We're the survivors of the Wager, here's our story." And they were immediately heralded as heroes, right? They survived, they made it. This is a crazy story, 2 years after the ship took off. Well, sometime after that, another ship washed up on another shore with even less survivors who said, "Wait a minute. Those guys are all mutineers. This is what really happened." And so now you have two conflicting stories about what happened when this ship was shipwrecked and all of these people were kind of Lord of the Fly, just living their best castaway lives. A lot of this is told through the point of views because of journals and things like that. They were kept by the survivors of the shipwreck. It was really, really interesting kind of hearing all of these things. Some of the people that actually survived this are related to really famous characters in history. It's interesting, and I could absolutely see it being like the story in the newspapers at the time. What really happened to The Wager? This, again, is a nonfiction, so it obviously got some dry parts. It's obviously got some really sad parts and some really messed up parts. If you are a fan of nonfiction, if you are a fan of maritime stories, this was a really good one. If you're not a fan of those, don't pick this up. You're not gonna like it. Also, I feel like talking about your favorite reads of the year is just so much fun. Who doesn't like talking about books they really liked? The first book that we're going to talk about, these are in no order whatsoever. These are in the order of I picked them up and they were on my shelf, or I feel like talking about them. How about that? Life is chaos, and so is this list. The first book we're going to talk about is The Shining by Stephen King. This should come as a surprise to absolutely no one. This book, although I won't say it's perfect, I just feel like it's so compulsively readable. I was so surprised by how much I enjoyed it and how quickly I flew through this. This book was a wild ride, and now that this was my third Stephen King novel that I have read, I can officially say that I am a fan of Stephen King books. I don't know if I will be a fan of everything he writes. I don't think that's how it works with authors, but I have really, really enjoyed everything I've picked up from him so far. This story, if you do not know what this is about, I want to know what it's like to live under that rock. I hope it's warm. This is the story of a family. This is the story of Jack Torrance, his wife Wendy, and his son Danny, and they all end up in a secluded hotel when Jack takes a job as the wintertime caretaker. So this family ends up in this ominous hotel, trapped by a very dense blizzard, cut off from civilization, when ooky spooky things start to happen. This story was absolutely heartbreaking because you are so invested in the character Danny, the son who is 5 years old, who also just happens to have this imaginary friend that sometimes gives him little glimpses of things that may or may not happen in the future. This book is very different from the movie. If you've only ever seen the movie, you could pick up the book and be pleasantly surprised by how different it is, which also probably lends itself to why just the internet says that Stephen King really, really disliked the movie adaptation. But that's honestly, after reading this, probably because one, this book seems like it was something that was very close to his heart. He kept it very close to the chest and was very personal to him, but also the messages and the themes in the movie are different from the messages and the themes in the book. They use the framework of the story to tell very different stories. They have very different focuses. They are very different. I really, really enjoyed this. I feel like I am late to the party, but I'm glad I'm finally here. The next book we are going to talk about is going to be Divine Rivals, and that is by Rebecca Ross. This book is, at the last time I checked, was still available on Kindle Unlimited. I know that the sequel, which has just recently come out, which is Ruthless, Vows, is not available on Kindle Unlimited, and honestly, if you're the writer slash publisher, pretty genius, because we've all read the first book and we need to know what happens in the second. I absolutely love this. This is I'm gonna call this a romance that takes place in a fantasy world. Not necessarily a romantasy, but that's just me nitpicking. You could absolutely call it a romantasy if you want to. You can call it anything you want to. I'm not going to stop you. This is a heartbreaking story about two ordinary people that are living through a war, and that war just happens to be happening in a fantasy world between two gods. So we have these fantasy elements, but you're following two normal people who have somewhat normal lives and seeing how these magical elements affect it. This is the story of Iris. She comes from a more humble beginning and is currently trying to win a position at a newspaper that she is in a competition with one other person for this one job opening. The other person that is in the competition for this job opening is Kit Roman, and he comes from the upper crust and an affluent family. Now, these two people are rivals put against each other trying to win this job, but they also really enjoy picking at each other. They are both very talented writers and see that within each other. Simultaneously, Iris is going through a lot. Her brother is off at this war between these two gods, and she really wants to write him, but she doesn't know where he is or how to get a letter to him. So she takes out this typewriter, types up a letter, and then just slips it in her wardrobe. Well, lo and behold, not only does someone receive this letter, but she receives a response. And so she starts a correspondence with this person through her wardrobe. This book was absolutely heartbreaking. I really, really loved it and was totally invested. We have a lot of talks about how war affects the everyday person, not just the soldier on the front, how these people that are involved in the war but aren't soldiers, such as the people writing the news, the people helping out in the hospitals, the people in these small towns close to the front, how they're affected by these things, how people feel guilty about finding moments of joy when war is happening, how relationships become really, really tight and ironclad fast when you're dealing with the trauma of something like war. There is a romance, there's magical elements. I'm in love with this, and I have recently received my copy of the second book and will be starting it soon. The next book we are going to talk about is City of Brass, and this is by S.A. Chakraborty. This is the first book in the Library Trilogy. I loved this. This is a political type fantasy. There's a lot of politics happening. There's a lot of behind the scenes people working the system trying to make alliances and figure out what their enemies' moves are going to be. But this is also the story of Nari. And Nari grew up in the city of Cairo. She doesn't remember much about where she came from, aside from the fact that she survived on the streets of Cairo by luck and by hustling. She is a con woman, and she also has the ability to look at people and see ailments. She can see what illnesses they have and has some small healing abilities as well. She has used all of her wits to survive on the streets and does a lot of things that she necessarily doesn't believe in, but hey, survival. Girls gotta make a buck, you know? So she ends up participating in a ceremony that she doesn't, again, necessarily believe in, but hey, she's gonna get paid. While doing this ceremony, she accidentally summons a djinn. Now, in summoning this djinn, she, one, learns that, oh my god, djinn are real. But two, all of these other magical creatures and magical elements are now aware of her existence as well. So not only does she know magic is real, but magic knows she is real. So her and her djinn take up this journey, reluctantly, to the legendary City of Brass. We also have another point of view that is taking place in this story that is one of the princes of the City of Brass, and his point of view gives us a lot of insight into what's going on in the city and the turmoil of what's happening. There is a lot of the haves and the have-nots. There's racism, there's poverty, there's a lot of things happening in this world. It could go bad quickly. And that's about as much as I'll give you. This is the first book in that series. It is so much fun. I loved the world that was created in this story. I really liked the lore. I really liked Nari, and I really liked our prince, our other point of view as well. They make a lot of choices that are smart for all of the information that they have, because one of my things that kind of drives me crazy is when you have characters that come in the mix and they're either making choices that don't make sense, that are stupid just to get the plot forward, or they're making choices that don't make sense because they have more information than that. Why wouldn't they make a better choice? These are nitpicks that I have. I didn't feel like that in the story. I felt like everyone was trying to make the best choices for what information they had available to them. I am excited to pick up the next book in this series and continue on. The next book we are going to talk about is going to be The Book That Wouldn't Burn, and that is by Mark Lawrence, and this is the first book in a new series by this author. What is the name of that series? The Library Trilogy is what it's called. This book introduces us to two main characters, one of those being a young woman who has grown up in this world where there is one major city and then everything in the land that surrounds the city is kind of just dust. Not much grows there. It sounds like it's very arid and a very desert-like climate, and the people that live out in the dust struggle. And she has grown up in the dust. When one day her very small village is attacked by a hostile force, and she is forcibly removed and makes the trek to the one large city. She, again and again, not only on the journey, but when she gets to the city, keeps proving that she is just so much more than she should be. Not that she should be anything. She's just a kid, but she has so much self-confidence. She's able to look at something and have empathy for other people around her, but also see a lot of the prejudice and things that are happening because of where people come from and what they look like. She is strong-willed, and she's not putting up with anybody's mess. The other point of view that we have is a young man who lives within this great library that is in the one large city in this world. Now, this library is, for lack of a better way of putting it, magical. It is infinite, incredibly vast, and full of all of the information you could ever want, for good or for bad. It has everything, and it sounds like it's very difficult to navigate. This young man has grown up in the library with several of his siblings and has a very interesting life, having grown up secluded within the library. And at some point, our female main character ends up in the library as well. We are then following these two point of views throughout the story as these stories kind of twist and turn and reveal. This book was absolutely masterfully crafted. It is one of those books that leads you down the path, giving you all of the information you need, but you're probably not paying attention to just the right things. When you get to the end of this book and the plots start twisting and the reveals start happening, you almost want to go back and start rereading it from the beginning so that you have the right set of eyes to pick up everything. It's that well done. There are so many things where it's like, you've been given the hints all along. It's not my fault you didn't pick up on this. The library itself is such a interesting setting for all of this, with its just infinite knowledge, but also its magical security systems and its mysterious origins. This story is the kind that you can tell throughout the trilogy. There's going to be more and more reveals. It feels like this is something that the author has like an entire wall in their house full of pictures and maps and those red strings. They have got just so much going on in their mind mapping this out, and everything is connected. It was incredibly interesting, entertaining, and I can't wait to keep going. I think the second one comes out. When does the second one come out? It comes out this year, and that one is The Book That Broke the World, and right now it's projected to come out on April 11th of 2024. I'm gonna have to pre-order it. The next book we are going to talk about is The Shadow of the Gods by Gwynne. This is the second series that I have started by this author. I have started the Malice series. I have not finished it, but this is the most recent series from this author. This is a Norse-inspired multi-POV epic fantasy. It is so stinking good. So we have these three different characters that are in very different places, and you're wondering how everything is going to be tied together. And also in this world, there has previously been a war within the gods, and most of the gods are now dead, but a lot of the artifacts of the gods are still used. The dead gods are still used. It is very, very cold and brutal. Orca is my favorite. I would join a cult in Orca's honor. She is amazing. I adore her. She gives no fucks. And she shouldn't, you know? She just shouldn't. The second book from this series is already out, and the third book is projected to come out in, I think, October of 2024. Fingers crossed. This book was so stinking good. The next book we are going to talk about is one of the most beautiful books I own, and that is GodKiller by Hannah Kaner. This book, this is the Illumicrate edition, and it's absolutely gorgeous. The hardcover, look at that. Just look at that. Aside from the fact that my good friend Cheese she ate the bottom here, but she's a puppy. That's what she's supposed to do. Destroy the things you love. This skinny little book is actually packs a big punch. This is the story of Kissian. Is that her name? I didn't even look. Yes. Look at that. Me pulling that deep out of my brain. This is the story of Kissian, and she is a god killer. Well, the story actually opens up with Kissian, a period of time, I think it's like 15 years. Let's see. We should have looked before. I am so good. This story actually opens up, tells us a very dramatic and sad story, and then jumps 15 years in the future where we have Kissian, who is a god killer. Now, in this world, it is incredibly easy to make a god. See, all it really takes is intention and prayer and tributes and gifts, and a god can form. There are a multitude of gods in this world, from something as small as the god of broken sandals to something as big as, you know, gods of war and gods of the ocean and things like that. Sorry, my leg is 100% asleep, and it started the pins and needles thing. Oh, no, wake up, wake up, wake up. Oh, I hate it. I think I'm okay. We're gonna sit like this now so that my leg doesn't go completely to sleep. Okay, it is incredibly easy to make a god. Kissian is a god killer because at some point there was a war with the gods, and it is now illegal for gods to exist. So these people called god killers popped up, and they're similar to a witcher. They move from town to town where they're needed. They're not looked at with a lot of reverence, but they have a necessary job. They show up, they kill a god, they get paid for it. So Kissian is a god killer. We also have a point of view of a man called Elo, or I believe it's Eligast, and he used to be the right hand for this prince that is now king. He was his #1 knight, and he has since left the service of the king and now works as a baker. We also have a third and fourth point of view, and that is Inara, and she is the young daughter of a noble. And the fourth point of view is, I'm gonna call him Skady, but I always want to say Sketty, like pasta, like a child would say spaghetti. Skady is a tiny little god. He's the god of white lies, and he is somehow tethered to Inara. Inara and Skady they don't know how they came to be bonded, but they're trying to figure a way to break the bond that keeps these two together. In this tiny book, we have so much packed in. We have all of these characters in their separate lives, and then they meet up and go on an adventure together for reasons. This was so stinking good. If you love a found family element to your fantasy books, pick this bad boy up. It's also such a short book that you can just absolutely fly through it. There's no fat in this. It is so well crafted in such a short amount of pages that there isn't really any gristle to get through. I am really excited because the second book in this comes out soon, and when the way this ended, it ends on one of those moments that leaves you hanging and you really want to get to the next book to see what happens to all your characters. Some questions are answered, some are left open, and I'm sure they will continue through the series. The next two books, we're going to lump them together because not only are they from the same author, but they're from the same series, but I feel like I need to talk about both of them. I can't pick one, and that is these two little skinny friends from Becky Chambers. This is A Song for the Well-Built, and this is the follow-up, which is A Prayer for the Crown Shy. They are tiny, but they are definitely worth your time. I guess you would call this cozy sci-fi. If you like cozy fantasy, cozy sci-fi is amazing, and I definitely recommend it. I feel like of all the Becky Chambers books I've read, she tends to lean towards more cozy sci-fi, but these are the epitome of cozy sci-fi. These two books follow sibling Dex, who is a tea monk, which is a monk that travels from small town to small town that serves tea and provides a listening ear for anybody who needs it. Whatever you need to talk about, this monk will listen to. But sibling Dex isn't feeling satisfied with their life anymore, and so one day they travel out into the woods and encounter the first robot that anyone has encountered since robots left society when they gained consciousness hundreds of years prior. See, one day, robots all gained consciousness, woke up, and said, we're out of here, and off they went. So it's kind of a big deal that sibling Dex has met our robot named Mosscap, who is the most precious creature, and I would do anything to keep them safe. These books are really just a warm hug. They're having really deep discussions about what the meaning of life is, what life is all about, the multiple views on what the meaning of life is, and how different they all are, but yet not necessarily wrong. It's amazing how sweet and deep these are without making you feel bogged down in emotion. You just kind of get to have deep conversations without ever feeling bad about it. I keep saying this is like being wrapped in a great big blanket, looking up at the stars and talking about life. It feels warm, it feels safe, but it also feels like you're having a real conversation. I love these, and they're adorable. And they make my heart happy. They just make me happy. The last book that we are going to talk about in my official list is going to be Empire of the Vampire, and this is by Kristoff. This hunk of a book. We just went from like the skinniest books I read to one of the biggest books I read. I think actually officially on Goodreads, this was the longest book I read. How many pages is this? It was 734 pages. This is a dark, brutal, sad, gruesome tale, and it's fantasy, and I loved it. This book starts off with you meeting a character that is called the Killer, who is being imprisoned in a tower. He has been captured by vampires, for lack of a better way of putting it, and he is the last remaining of his order. So his captors take it upon themselves to interview him, and they want to know how it is he became this hero, what the order that he is a member of, what happened to them. He also is kind of their boogeyman, and they want to know all about him. He is kind of a snarky jerk, but like the kind you love. Like, I don't know how else to put it. There's a lot of cussing. He's not nice, but he is nice. He's that character that I feel like is showing up in a lot of literature and TV and movies where it's like, he's the rough around the edges hero that is a reluctant hero that has seen some stuff and is jaded and hard, but really deep down in the center, he's a hero, even if he doesn't want to be. He's a damn hero. He spends the majority of this book going back and forth through 2 points of view in time. He is telling his origin story, I was born, I grew up, and how I became a Silver Saint. But he's also telling a story that happens, I believe, in his 30s, so sometime later, and his captors are also very interested in that story as well. So we have 2 timelines going on. We also have the kind of overarching point of view of him giving his life story. Horrible, sad, awful things happen. There is blood, there is gore, there is battle, there is vampires. It's so much fun. If you like dark, brutal fantasy books, this one is just so enjoyable. And so the second book to this one, actually, I have pre-ordered and should be coming to me soon. I think it comes out the next couple of months. So I'm pretty sure it's also going to be a behemoth of a book. But if big books don't scare you, this was a good one. But that, kids, are my top reads of 2023. I had a really good reading year. I was really proud of myself. This was obviously the year of fantasy because a lot of my top reads were fantasy books. And there's a sci-fi in there. I'm a Stephen King, so why not? I'm looking forward to finishing or continuing on with a lot of these series that were some of my favorites moving into 2024. I'm excited about a bunch of books that I know are coming up. I'm excited in general about reading, and I hope you are too. If you had fun hanging out with me and the dogs, please subscribe, even though they literally left me alone this entire time. I literally timed this perfectly. I hope you're reading good books out there, wherever you are, and I'll see you next time.